Oh, it worked.
Yeah, it's on.
So now we're gonna have a live stream with no technical issues whatsoever, which I think was a good decision on our part not to have any technical issues this time. So see how that goes. So welcome to another T.REX Talk, you guys. I'm Isaac Botkin. This is David Botkin. We're going to be talking about stuff and things. This is one of those. This is what T.REX Talks was kind of originally supposed to be, more conversational. We're going to talk about various bits and pieces of equipment and kit. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how we think the year is going. It's
going fantastic.
It's going fantastic. Yes, Biden's first 100 days in office are
so peaceful.
Just So if I remember the deal that the government, not the government, the deal that the media gave us was basically everything bad in the world was Donald Trump's fault.
Right.
So if Donald Trump went away,
everything would get better.
Everything would be better because he wouldn't be doing anything bad. Only good things would happen. And I think that the last 100 days or so has totally
proven that case.
Yeah. No, I think they made good on their offer. Totally. Yeah. So that's where we're at today. We're looking at a bunch of interesting stuff going on. Technically, I did just want to make the case. Technically, we are back to normal because what was normal for a big part of my childhood was rising gas prices, rising inflation, rising everything prices, trouble in the Middle East, shortages of certain things. So technically, we're getting back to normal.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean what was it when we were little and we went to McDonald's? How much was one of those little cheeseburgers?
We are very old, so I think they were like 8 cents on a toy.
I think it was like 19 cents, and now they're $1. So the inflation thing, that's normal.
There's a whole bunch of things that are happening right now, and it's very hard to actually pin down. But one of the things that we are going to talk about a little bit is the Colonial Pipeline shutdown, gas shortages, stuff that revealed about supply lines, stuff that revealed about humans, which we already kind of saw as soon as there was a hint that toilet paper would be hard to come by. Everybody went and bought more toilet paper than they could use so that their neighbors wouldn't have any. Right. Turns out people do the same thing with gasoline. Also,
drive your Tesla to a gas station and buy all the gas.
Yes, and put it in a styrofoam cooler so that you can be literally making napalm
on the drive home.
On the drive home in the front of your Tesla. It's a great 2021 move that is indicative of just so much 2021 stuff.
The firefighters will love that combination: an electric car with a cooler full of napalm.
Oh my goodness! I hadn't even thought about. You would need to use all the chemicals in conjunction with one another. All right.
I have no idea how you'd put that out.
Someone here mentions that they remember the Carter years. Yeah, so it's very interesting that we had our first gas shortage days after the Bidens went to visit the Carters and took that hilarious
tiny
picture.
Carters.
The tiny Carters. Yeah, so we have we got jokes, folks. Comment on how to deal with China, please. Well, obviously we
love China. They're the most benevolent, kind people. Tibet never happened. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we are talking about the summer of peace and love. We anticipate that things that are interesting in the current year are going to keep getting more interesting. Mm-hmm. There are deep and systemic instabilities in the systems that we have, and when that gets shaken up and things start failing, those deeply and inherently unstable systems do not become more stable when they start to fall apart. That's just not the way that they trend. So I do anticipate that there will continue to be some issues this summer, and there will continue to be shortages of certain things. There will continue to be bizarre price fluctuations. Inflation is the only thing that will be constant. Well, it won't be linear, but it will be constant.
Fluctuating shortages will probably be constant. So we had a planning meeting I think it was a month or two before Black Friday, and I told everyone in that staff meeting they should prep and expect 5 more years of 2020. And I think that sounds horrible, but I think that's what it's going to look like. And it's not necessarily all going to be the same things of 2020. It's going to be it'll change and it'll vary. But the uncertainty, the disruptions of different kinds, the disruptions in supply lines and things, I think that we'll continue to see that. Like even just this last week, we've had a huge Bitcoin crash was that today? Just today?
It was mostly just today, yeah.
And then lumber is down 25% in the last week or so. You know,
Yeah.
lumber is doing this crazy climb, and then it does this crazy drop off. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of commodities are up. If people realize there's a bubble there, the market will correct. So I think we should just plan for a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's been a couple things that we haven't seen quite yet. We've seen tremendous levels of government overreach from the federal government when it comes to predictions or declarations. Just what's the right term? Ham-fisted declarations about this is the rule now about masks and vax
Yep.
and stuff like that, and pushback from different states. So that's going to be something that is. I don't know how that exactly comes to a head, but that is going to be a point of considerable friction, and that's going to throw various wrenches into various things. So there'll be that possibility. But something that we haven't seen yet in 2021 that we did see quite a bit in 2020 is significant riots. So that is continually on the menu because one of the things that you
Significant protests,
mostly peaceful protests. We haven't seen that in a significant level this year, but I think we will as the weather gets better and as certain events happen. We're going to see more and more of that happening in 2021. So could possibly be.
It's not really comfortable to go and protest peacefully during the summer until after dark. And as it happens, certain types of protesting are best done after dark, and so they have to wait until the weather conditions are right.
Yeah. So that's. Well, the other reason that I was going to bring up why it's on the menu is if you study history, you will see that protesting, we're in favor of protesting. Rioting, we are not in favor of. Rioting, and what did there have been some interesting euphemisms for this, but rioting is a very powerful tool for political change, and so certain types of people, particularly people that want to change in a particular direction, tend to pull rioting out. The problem is that it is really hard to unring that bell. And so a lot of times throughout history, you see external agitators who use riots as a way of getting their, they basically are agitators. They get the people to riot so that they can get their own personal way. But once rioting is on the table as a political tool, it starts to happen more and more organically without the external push, without the external help. We saw this in Arab Spring. We've seen this throughout the history of various communist countries. And so there's no reason why I think that rioting is completely off the table, even though Joe Biden is in office and everything is perfect and back to normal and no bad things will ever happen again ever.
So I found it interesting that Inauguration Day, so there were a bunch of riots following Donald Trump's inauguration, and they're the January 20th riots. And I found it interesting, on Biden's inauguration day, those same riots happened. And I think it was Denver, a Democratic Party headquarters got trashed as part of these riots. And I think what we're seeing is there's a group of people, they're not just anti-Trumpers, there's something bigger than that. And I think that they're hardcore socialists or something along that line, communists, Marxists. I don't quite know the right term.
I don't think you can talk about them that way on YouTube. I think that you have to call them like the Amish.
Right. Okay. So there's these Amish. Yeah, you can always talk about the Amish. They're not on the internet, so they can't be offended.
It's true. Yeah.
Right. So these people, whoever they are not satisfied that Biden is in power because they want to destroy the system as it currently exists, and Biden is just another piece of the system.
Again, we're talking about the Amish.
Right.
Or Mennonites. Go on.
Could be Mennonites. So I think that those people that want to fundamentally overthrow the system of government that we have now are not satisfied with a change in president. And I think that those actors that are working very hard to achieve their ends are going to continue with the actions they've already started on. And so the forms of protest, and particularly I think the violent ones, I could be wrong, but my hunch is that what we'll see as we come into the summer months is a lot more protests, riots, whatever you want to call them. And my hunch is they'll be centered around Trump-era policies.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that, but that's my best guess. And my guess is that they will whoever is really fueling this and driving this are going to continue doing this because their fundamental underlying goals have not been met. And I don't think they're just going to pack up and go home since Biden is in office.
Right. Well, now, and I think that there's multiple levels of people in these Amish communities that we decided it was. But there were people who want to fundamentally change and destroy the system, and then there were people who just wanted to get a Democrat elected to office. And they kind of worked together.
Right.
And one half of that pairing is now happy because a Democrat is in office, and the other half of that pairing continues to not be happy because the entire system hasn't been destroyed quite yet.
Right.
Although, I will say, Democratic president, definitely on the right track to destroying the whole system. So, yeah. So that's going to be it's going to be interesting to keep watching. But I do predict, as stuff happens. Well, also, the rules became basically if there is a fundamental miscarriage of justice related to various police actions, the response, the appropriate and proper response to that is going to be riots. I guarantee, human nature being what it is, that will happen sometime in the future. And the appropriate response, according to the media, according to a lot of elected officials last year, is full-scale protests and then some. So when that happens again, that's a when, not an if. There are a bunch of people who have been trained to see the appropriate proper response as rioting. So we will see rioting again.
It was very interesting. When we were growing up, both parties completely condemned violence as a means of political expression, right? You know, if a Republican or Democrat at some low level punched another one, that would be roundly condemned by everybody. And punch a Nazi became a thing where it was not just acceptable, but it was right to use violence as a means to express yourself politically and address certain wrongs. And that entered the national vocabulary in a big way in the last 4 years. And no one, I'm not hearing anybody proposing winding that back and going back to the way it was before and saying, nope, actually, we're not going to have violence at all. We're going to go back to purely verbal altercations. Yeah. And so I think that thing, what was it, once it's tripped, it's hard to go back. We're seeing that, and we're going to continue to see the ramifications of that. And I think that we're also going to see police officers make mistakes, whether they're a result of incompetence, grabbing I don't know if this is incompetence, I'm just using this as an example, grabbing a taser instead of a gun, whether it's a mistake or whether it's an actual, really bad act, like the officer that, I can't remember the name of the shooting, there was an altercation and the subject broke away and was running, and this is all on footage, and the cop is just calmly plinking off shots at the fleeing guy and kills him. I don't know which it's going to be, but there's going to be some sort of mistake made, and it's going to be the grounds for another round of significant protests.
And it'll be interesting to see what the different people who blamed everything on Trump will say when that happens. Yeah. If they will just be very quiet as peace and love breaks widely out across the cities, or whether they will actually have some comments to make, but we'll see. So, so this is kind of an interesting thing. We also had the gas crisis. It was a pretty small gas crisis. I think it was just a warm-up. But Colonial Pipeline was subject...
You've researched this more than I have.
It was subject to a ransomware attack from a somewhat organized crime group based out of Russia. And their entire billing operation was seized, and a bunch of their customer records were seized. About 100 gigabytes of data was stolen, and they wanted to, it's a typical ransomware attack. But they shut down the actual automatic operation of the pipeline, probably because those are intrinsically tied together. And there's a bunch of people on the internet who have made lots of suggestions as to why that was wrong, why gas pipelines should basically be public utilities and run by the government. That way nothing bad will ever happen with them.
Clearly.
But this is a very problematic suggestion. But it is kind of interesting just to see the result of that, because even though there wasn't actually a gas shortage, there was just really a difficulty in getting gas to the end of that pipeline, basically. Washington, D.C. had some of the worst outages. The pipeline runs from 70%. Texas all the way up to New Jersey. And the market actually adapted really well. It was... the private companies that manage the distribution of fuel adapt really well. Even like Gas Buddy. Gas Buddy had a new page on their website covering all of the gas stations that had fuel and those that didn't, I think within 2 days. And then 2 days after that, they'd integrated it into their app. So private companies found ways to adapt to and work around different things very quickly. Private individuals went out and filled styrofoam coolers full of gasoline. And then now there's a bunch of people demanding that the government be put in control of this so that it can never happen again, even though the government is ruthlessly incompetent.
I mean, one of the biggest victims of ransomware attacks have been municipal governments.
Because they are ruthlessly incompetent.
DC Police is one of the groups that currently has a bunch of their personnel files stolen by a ransomware group. And interestingly, the ransomware group there have actually leaked alleged text exchanges between them.
They're making the negotiations public.
Yes, it's hilarious. They're like, we want $4 million. And DC Police is like, we're not the Capitol Police. We're just DC Police. We're just this little police department.
And you've gotten us mixed up.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah. So this is something that it provides a lot of interesting intelligence gathering capability. Now, one of the interesting things about this is we actually both went out of town on a little tiny short, two separate weekend getaways during the gas crisis, which was fairly easy for you because you were going.
I only went to Chattanooga.
Well, I was going to say you went to a place that was less than a gas tank away. I'm not going to say where I went to, but I went to a place that was more than one gas tank away. I tried to think through some of the different possibilities and game out basically what might happen while I was away for a couple of days, and put together a sort of a get home kit, which we can talk about in a little bit. But you took some stuff with you as well, because one of the things that we do at T.REX is talk a lot about personal responsibility. And while it's fun to talk about, and I think important to talk about ways that we could build more decentralized systems for doing things at a large level, you are personally responsible for yourself. The individual is the ultimately the most decentralized unit that needs to bear personal responsibility and be capable of doing things to protect and help other people. So,
I didn't really do anything different on my trip. I always have I call it a crash bag. So we used to do volunteer firework. And I still remember my first real car wreck on the interstate. The jaws of life didn't work, and we had to use a hacksaw to pry open the door and get at the little locking ring that the door grabs and cut that so the door could be opened. And so in my bag, I carry large oversized insulated pliers so I can disconnect car batteries, screwdriver, set of screwdrivers, and a miniature hacksaw so that in something like that, I could potentially cut open a door. And it's a medium-sized medical kit and some other tools and stuff. So I always carry things like that. I always carry, some firearms, and
really,
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So
well, I also carry with me always some firearms. Medical stuff. So there is. I also made a list of stuff. So there's actually two lists that came out of this weekend trip. The first is what I actually had that I was able to take on top of my normal stuff, and the second is a wish list of stuff that I came up with that I didn't actually have and still don't, but need to begin accumulating. But in addition to my regular medical extraction stuff, crash bag stuff, personal everyday carry firearm, but also rifle, ready rig with ammo, multi-tool, various light stuff, night vision binocular, but also added to the Get Home kit, 9-day emergency food supply, which, by the way, it's terrible, but it's probably better than starving to death, slightly better than starving to death.
I would expect it's better than starving.
It's only a little bit better than starving to death.
Okay, so in 9 days you wouldn't have starved to death, but in 9 days you would have probably really bad energy.
That's true. So these are the 5-year-long emergency rations are not fun to eat, but marginally better than starving to death. And water filtration stuff and radios. I made sure that the offline maps on my phone were up to date. Had USB packs to charge various navigation and charge the radios, stuff like that. So that was all part of the emergency get-home kit, even though I
Yes.
wasn't necessarily expecting emergency. If I was actually expecting emergency, I would have stayed home with
Right.
all of my actual supplies.
Right.
But yeah, so that was something that threw together very quickly.
Yep.
Tried to game out what would happen if the pipeline continued to be closed and various other things started to happen. But I added a couple stuff to my list. Basically, I had with me UHF radios,
Yep.
which are great for talking on the short distance. I did not bring my HF radio rig because there's nobody back here in Tennessee that has an HF radio rig for me to talk to. So
Yep.
one of the things that's on my to-do list is to set that up so that I have a permanent home station with some folks.
Yes, and I learned something really interesting this last week. So in the old days, if you wanted to get a ham radio license, you had to physically go to a testing location. Well, a lot of the volunteer examiners, I don't know how they did this, but they figured out a way to do the testing on the internet. So like you schedule a test session with the VEs, and then you actually can go through the test remotely through Zoom or something. And so it's still like $15. So you can go and do your studies. There's a bunch of study resources out there. I should actually go research this so I can actually recommend something. You could study. We found when we got our ham radio licenses, you could pass the entry-level exam with about 4 to 6 hours of study.
Oh yeah, it's just very simple.
And at that point, the problem was you had to find a testing location and get it scheduled. But if you can do that online, it just suddenly became so much easier. And at $15 a pop, there's really practically no hurdle to someone becoming ham certified at this point.
Yeah.
And for that same $15, you can take the technician test and the general test, which is what you really want if you're going to do any HF comms. And then if you have the knowledge and skills, you can take the extra, the top level test. And you can actually do all three of those in one go.
For $15.
For $15.
We should actually, so we need to do a radio stream shortly. I know you have radio stuff here. We can talk more about radio stuff here, but we need to do a better sort of entry-level radio live stream. Actually, you should probably do that. But there's people pointing out ham radio test apps. Those are totally the way to go. Take practice tests for a few hours, and you will be able to get your technician license for sure.
There was a great PDF that I found, and basically they walked through the question pool, explaining each point. Like, here's how radio signals bounce off the ionosphere. And they would put in bold the correct answer. They would write the paragraph in such a way that it included the correct answer to the question, and they would put that in bold. So basically, if you read it, number one, you would learn it, and number two, if you paid attention to every bold statement, you'd be like, I need to remember this for later. And it actually worked really well. I should go find that PDF, and we can recommend it. But yeah, it's really not hard to get your ham license. And at that point, it opens up. You have this huge block of VHF. You have this huge block of UHF. It gives you these HF freaks. It's not, for the most part, it's not channelized. It's just like a great big sandbox. You can go play in it.
Yeah.
And there's rules. There's no encryption, but it does allow the use of things like DMR. So you can use digital modes, and they're not the same as encryption, but for most people, for practical purposes, it's going to give you a lot of the same advantages.
Yeah. I will say, though, encryption on radio is not as valuable as most people think because, I mean, I guess it depends on who you're trying to hide from, but if I have the right equipment, and by right equipment I mean like less than $1,000 worth of equipment, and I'm in your general area, I can see all of the people who are broadcasting around me with their encrypted radios, and I can see exactly where they are, and how many of them there are, and have a rough idea of how often they're communicating and what about, even if they are encrypted. So the main things that you're trying to hide from people who are listening in on you are in the clear, technically, even though they are encrypted. So think through the ramifications of what it is that you are trying to accomplish, because there's a lot of folks that treat encrypted radios as the holy grail. It is an extra 10% level of security for certain things. And then if all you want to do is just not let the neighbors overhear everything that you're saying, then it actually accomplishes that. But Think through what you're actually trying to accomplish and build your threat model.
The main thing is the second you key up your radio and you're transmitting, you're emanating all this energy from your location and you're broadcasting data and also exactly where you are essentially. There's even a type of ham radio game called fox hunting where a transmitter is set up somewhere transmitting either intermittently or continuously, and it is the goal of the participants to geographically locate the transmitter, the fox. And so people can make very simple directional antennas, and basically from this point they scan and they identify the fox is in this direction, and then they go over here and they do it again and they identify the fox is in this direction, and then they can find the rough location, go there, do it again until they find the fox.
Yeah.
It's a whole game. It's doable with not much tech.
Well, technically, you can do that without a license. You can always listen without a license. It's only transmitting where you need any sort of license. So
the simplest.
Start researching now without the license by
Yeah.
getting some equipment and listening and doing the study. So
With some of the low power fox hunting I've read about, they say one of the easiest ways to do it is just take your radio and hold it against your body and just turn and keep the monitor button depressed. And as the signal gets stronger or weaker, you know the rough direction that transmitter is in. So you could do it with just a handheld radio if it's something fairly weak.
Yeah. So, so signals, intelligence, radio stuff. A lot of people asking radio questions. People asking about the ultimate Baofeng setup. So this is something that you've been playing with. So let's talk about this for a minute. Someone says, get a $25 SDR in a Pringles can. That's a great directional antenna. The cantenna works wonders.
Yeah.
Talk about Palestine. Sorry, I don't play Pokemon. Tug of war between government and the individual. Yes. Is it possible to set up an HF radio in a vehicle for mobile comms? Yes. It is possible to set up an HF radio in a backpack for mobile comms. It's something that's on my to-do list. It's been on my to-do list for a while.
So there's some really fascinating stuff coming out of Palestine, if we wanted to talk about it.
Let's see what the chat says. Charles, should we talk about? I don't know. I just feel like.
Why do we have to have opinions on this?
Have opinions on this?
Because everything was solved.
To share them.
Oh, we don't have to be forced to share our opinions.
So one of the fascinating things is how inexpensively an actor can make war.
Okay, so there's two fascinating things coming out of this. One is how, not very effective, but how cheap the cheap rockets are. And then the second is how effective some of the expensive stuff are. Those are two fascinating lessons to look at. Opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
The cheap stuff that is not very effective is incredibly cheap. And the effective stuff that is not cheap at all is incredibly effective.
The budget rockets are apparently in the $300 to $800 range, and their budget. But it's almost amazing how you have completely opposite technological ends of the spectrum. You have, Israel is allegedly using some really
Are you talking about Dime?
Well, yeah, they
Do
may
you want
be
to talk about Dime?
So they deny it.
Somebody points out that there is a YouTube moderator with his finger hovering over the ban button at this very moment. But we can talk about Dime. They say they're not using it, so this would be a purely academic, hypothetical conversation.
But the interesting thing is there's peak level technology and there's bargain basement level technology, and they're being used against each other.
And they're both being funded by our tax dollars and foreign aid money. So that is also a hilarious observation at this point.
Anyway, there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, completely apart from any of the political concerns. Just the tech and the way it's being employed is really interesting. So we can move on from there.
Yeah.
I'd rather not get banned.
Free Palestine. It's not free. There's a lot of strings attached. You should read all the fine print. Someone here is saying can't stand Middle Eastern talk. Yeah. Let's talk about radios.
Well, I would just tell the person that can't stand it. So I grew up studying a lot of World War II history. And one of the interesting things about studying the Middle Eastern conflicts is the Arab-Israeli War the first one starts in 48, 49. So just right after World War II. And all the tech is World War II tech. The Mausers, Spitfires, ME 109s, B-17s.
Browning high powers everywhere.
It's all World War II tech. And then about every 10 years, you have another war. And you have, the advent of jet fighters, the advent of ground-to-air rockets. You have all this new technology coming in on a roughly 10-year interval. And since you have basically the U.S. on one side and the Soviet on the other side, they're all pumping their latest and greatest tech into the conflict.
Every little proxy war is the next generation of military technology.
Yes.
It is very fascinating to study.
It's the sandbox for that tech. And so as you read through those conflicts, you're seeing this come into, what happens when this happens? The Israelis adopted after, I think it was the 6-Day War, flying artillery. This is the solution. And then the Soviets came out with their surface-to-air missiles that were guided and tracking, and that completely changed everything. The Israelis lost a ton of aircraft in the next war. And, so you have this development technology coming in and reshaping tactics as a result. And so even if you have major concerns with, I guess you could say, the political aspect, just the technological development is a fascinating study.
Yeah, there's a ton of amazing research that's come out. We have a friend who is a SWAT doc, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
Some of the best trauma medicine stuff, research and developments comes out of Israel because, for obvious reasons, it comes out of Israel. So that's another thing to look for as well.
So some of the best, his point was really interesting. Like a lot of the best trauma stuff is U.S. military. Said, but there's a problem. They're highly experienced at applying medical treatment to trauma victims that are male, top physical fitness, in their 20s. And he said, this doesn't apply well to
the elderly,
or people that are obese, or whatever.
Or small children.
Or children. And he said, the people that know that stuff are the Israelis, because they have
a pretty ongoing,
yes,
high-level kinetic conflict
yeah,
that involves collateral damage in civilians, so they have lots of opportunities to try to help
exactly.
out wide varieties of demographics.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a way that we can say that in a way that doesn't get us banned from YouTube, so should probably move on to radios.
Isn't it wonderful that we have free speech?
Mm-hmm. It's good stuff.
It's mind-boggling.
Prince
mind-boggling.
Prince Harry thinks it's bonkers, but the fact that he was allowed to say that is even more bonkers.
And no one set off with his head.
Nobody did. So we got some budget radios here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about SDRs possibly.
So this is kind of interesting. This is an absolutely ancient UV5R. We bought this when they were like $60, which was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And then this is a UV82, which is basically identical software-wise. And again, I got this when it was brand new. And then this is a Retivus. It's made by TYT, I believe.
This is a higher quality radio. But I will say right off the bat, the build quality seems higher.
Yes.
From a radio perspective, all of these radios are really not great. They have significant problems with harmonics. They have significant problems with the way that they actually deal with signal processing, so that they're really not the best for certain things. But they are a great entry-level way to do stuff. They're a great thing to have on hand, to hand out to people who are not set up for comms. So, if you want to become a professional radio operator, or you want to really dive into this stuff, start here, but this is not the ultimate. The Fang Gang is not top-of-the-line comms people. That is the bargain basement entry-level stuff, but it all does work and even last for a while.
Yeah, so this radio here,
For a while.
So they do tend to break.
Yeah.
Yes. Now this one here, I've had this one probably for 10 years. And the battery latch no longer works because I've had to tape the battery to the body of the radio so it doesn't fall off. The knob cover is gone. I think the onboard microphone died, so I have to use it with a shoulder mic.
It's almost like it's not worth dealing with this.
Yes,
now but the $20 radio.
But this was my firefighting radio back in the day.
I know.
And I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying that's what I did. And so the cool thing about the Baofangs is just how incredibly versatile they are and how budget. I mean, I think this was $25. I just bought a new one because I wanted to compare it to my ancient one. And I think this one was like $29. And this one even has a metal housing, which I was kind of impressed by. The Baofeng just has a a plastic body.
I will say another thing that I just thought of is you should probably know how a Baofeng works in the same way that you should know how to handle an AR-15 and an AK-47. You need to know the manual of arms for both platforms, even if you only want to use one, because they are everywhere. You should know how to change the settings on a Baofeng because they are everywhere. You might go to a place where you don't have your radios, but there are Baofengs everywhere. You'll pick up a Baofeng and you want to know how to use it. So
the great
you should
thing
have
is,
one, even though the squelch tail is annoying. The
So,
front end is annoying. The harmonics are bad.
technically, you should not use this on FRS, Family Radio Service frequencies.
Well, technically you should, but legally you shouldn't. Did I say that right? Legally you should.
When I say technically, I technically mean legally.
Okay.
But practically speaking, technologically speaking, yeah, it'll totally work on those freaks. You know, it'll work on MERS, it'll work on GMRS. I'm not quite sure. I think it would need to be what's called a Part 90 radio, Part 90 certified. Let me see if this one is. It doesn't say Part 90 on the sticker. So when you have a radio like this, it has a sticker that has like its FCC ID on it.
We care deeply about FCC compliance, by the way. Just stating that for the record and the YouTube moderators.
Although, having researched this quite a bit, I've never been able to find a case of someone using a non-type certified radio getting busted by the FCC. I've found fire department using FRS bubble pack radios getting in trouble. I've found pirate radio stations getting in trouble. I've found people transmitting music nonstop on commercial or ham frequencies nonstop. Those people get in trouble, but I've never seen someone.
Some of those people get in trouble.
So, yeah, you can find these, but there's people that are really worried about the FCC coming and busting you and hitting you with that $10,000 fine. But if you have a GMRS license, which I think is now $70 for 10 years, I think that's what it is, and you use a non-Type 90, Part 90 radio to communicate with, I don't think anything's going to happen to you. I'm not a lawyer.
I don't think anything's going to happen to you either. But for the record and for the YouTube community guidelines, just want to say that you're a terrible, terrible person and you will go to jail forever because...
No, it's only a $10,000 fine.
Okay.
But it appears always send a warning letter first saying stop.
I will also say there is a huge amount of self-policing within the ham community, similar to in the firearm community.
Yes.
The people who will get you in trouble are fellow hams, not actual FCC investigators driving around scanning you. So.
But the great thing about these radios is, and I would totally recommend that you get one and play with it and learn the menus and learn how to punch in frequencies and connect with stuff.
And actually use it and do stuff with it.
Right. And with the ability to get a ham radio license being so much easier now than it used to be, I think everyone should do it. But it's great because it'll interoperate with almost any radio system. You're like, this expensive Hytera can also do analog frequencies. And so, they'll talk together, although they'll do feedback if you're too close.
Yeah.
Test. So, you can do that. And, right now when ammo is freaky expensive and guns are harder to get and stuff, everyone says that the three rules of a gunfighter: shoot, move, communicate. Mm-hmm. And as it happens, there's some really budget level that are actually surprisingly good quality communication tools.
Yeah. And actually use them. Don't just keep them in the glove box.
No,
like I do.
Because when you bust it out and you start flipping through the menu, you'll be like,
wait a minute. How do I turn DTS off?
Why can't I talk to this? What does this step mean? What does this TXP mean? You should go through and really play with all the settings, learn how it works. It's not, the Baofeng is honestly one of the easier radios to play around with. Some of the other radios are really obtuse in their menu system.
Yeah. And if you're like me, you can read about functions of radios, but if I can't actually experiment and get some kind of hands-on stuff going on, I'm never going to remember the stuff that I read. So if you start to research ham stuff, you buy a radio you're actually in the menus doing the stuff that you're reading about. It's going to stick a lot better.
Yeah. The other thing we're going to be playing around with some here is everyone wants comm setup, radio tied into EarPro, and the military loves it. SWAT teams love it. The way they typically do it is very expensive. This is something that I've been interested in personally for a long time, is how do you do this at a more reasonable level? And what I've played with over the years has been using a shoulder mic. Most of these budget radios have a Kenwood 2-pin adapter, which I don't know if you can see that. And then most shoulder mics, whether they're relatively budget, this one is made by a company called Calm Mountain, and is actually feels really good. I haven't been playing with it very long, but basically most of them have a headphone jack on them, and quite a few different types of EarPro have a headphone jack on them as well. And so for not that much money, you can actually have a way to put your radio into your EarPro. One of the other advantages of this approach is you could also just put this into a pair of earbuds and wear this under your shirt, and you have a low-vis comm setup. Whereas a lot of the military-style PTTs, you hook that up to your radio, and there's no way to go to anything other than your Sordens or your Comtacs or whatever.
People are asking a lot of questions. So
Sure.
Disco 32 makes adapters if you want to do it that way, which is the correct way to do it. And there's a lot of reasons to do it that way. But one of the things that I like about this system is you can hide this radio and have the shoulder mic somewhere and it works. You can plug earbuds in, like David said, and run them under your non-active EarPro, or you can plug them into your active EarPro. If you have to take it off and unplug it, it works just like this.
Yep.
It's a pretty versatile system that fails gracefully, even though it's not bomb-proof.
It's not the super tactical version. Yeah. One thing I would note, just the little we have played around with this, we have some different EarPro, and we have some, the Peltor range guards seem to be the winner. A lot of the different EarPro on some, I don't know if it's all frequencies, but on some frequencies, when you key up your transmitter, the EarPro picks up some of that signal and you get all this static in your ears or signal or whatever.
The Howard Lights, which are my favorite budget on range EarPro, are terrible at this. They are not
key up
shielded.
and it's just
the interference is, they are very sensitive to interference.
The Peltor Tactical 500s, which is what I usually wear on the range, they have a very small amount of noise. I don't know if that's because it has a Bluetooth chip in it or what, but these range guards, they're awesome. There's nothing. It's like they're fully shielded or something. Now, I haven't tried all the frequencies, but the UHF ones we were playing with yesterday were, it was very quiet. But yeah, that's another thing that deserves testing, and we want to do some thorough testing and just haven't gotten there yet.
So another thing that I have been doing is running Bluetooth earbuds underneath EarPro and connecting to Bluetooth-enabled radio. So that works relatively well. These are the what are they called? They're the Samsung EarPro. What are they called? The Buds. The Buds, yeah. The Buds Plus, not the Buds Pro. Hard to keep track of. But they fit inside flush enough that these fit under every piece of EarPro that I have tried. Part of that is my ears stick out a lot, so they offer protection to the earbuds themselves. But one of the things that works pretty well with these is they have microphones, so if I have on active hearing protection on top, that actually goes through the earbuds pretty well, except on the Howard Lights. They fit perfectly, but they get interference from the actual Bluetooth earbuds, and the earbuds also pick up some of the kind of not very good audio quality from the Howard Lights. So as much as I love these and have used them for years and years and years, they don't work with comms as cleanly as those the Peltor Range Masters or
Range Guards.
Range Guards.
Yeah, it's actually really, I find it kind of ironic. I have here the Tactical 100s, which are sort of their budget tactical headphones, and the Range Guards are just like better in every conceivable way. The sound quality is better. So, and they're cheaper.
Some folks asking, can you use the earbud mic to talk? You can if you're using Active Ear Pro, because this microphone on the outside of the muffs picks up your voice and it comes through and the earbud mic hears it.
Yeah.
Because these are so well shielded, the left earbud always disconnects from Bluetooth when I use them. So it's not perfect. But one of the reasons that I do really like that system is, first of all, there's no cable management, which is super nice.
Yep.
The other thing is wearing earbuds is very low profile and low key, and it's enough hearing protection for most suppressed shooting that I do.
Yep.
And then I can quickly add these for unsuppressed shooting or whatever. But I have earbuds connected to radio, even if radio isn't bagged, no cable management. And then if I add AirPro on top, I just continue to have all of that connectivity without changing a bunch of stuff out. So that's one thing that I like about the Bluetooth Plus Active. The downside is, of course, not very many radios have Bluetooth. We need to test those prime Bluetooth adapters to see how well those work. But I do like the idea of earbuds, even if they're wired earbuds that are connected to a shoulder mic, under AirPro, so that you can real quickly put them on and take them off and have your comms connected either way.
Right. Well, and I think another component is, I think the ability to have low vis stuff, where you're not looking for trouble, you're just doing your stuff, you don't want to draw attention to yourself, but you want to have some capabilities, I think is key. And that's where what some people do is they'll put like one of those acoustic tube units in their ear and a low-vis PTT attached to their radio. And then if they need to put on AirPro, that can go over top, and the acoustic tube just stays in place. And that way they have no interruption in their comms and the ability to level up their hearing protection if they need to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff needs testing.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff does need testing. That's kind of the biggest issue with some of these things, and it's part of the reason that so many people push Baofangs. Like we've said, they're a great cheap entry-level radio, but they have significant issues with quality at a number of different levels, both transmission and build quality. But it's a standard that people understand, and so it's much easier for people to say, I have this AirPro and I have a Baofeng, what adapter do I get? How do I actually connect the two?
Yeah.
There's a reason that it is a entry-level standard, and we need to up our game, but it means testing a bunch of stuff that nobody on the internet has potentially written up before. So you might be testing stuff from scratch, but yeah, figure out a way where you can test everything and show your work, because it'll be really beneficial to other folks to know that there's an issue with the pinouts on the Hytera that don't work with such and such, and then the Retevis radios actually do this, and your range guards actually have the shielding where they don't suffer from interference when you run your comm super close. Stuff like that is stuff that people need to be experimenting with and documenting for other folks and sharing.
Yeah, but so far I've been really pleased with these.
Yeah.
They sat out in the rain once for 2 weeks and still work.
How did that happen?
I think I left them on the excavator.
Oh, I thought it might have had something to do with small children, but
Might have. Yeah.
yeah. Most
What
of the
else?
comments are people fighting about Israel, so that is
Well, that's appropriate.
that's exactly the way that the internet is supposed to work. That's what it's supposed to be used for. Thank you so much, you guys, for making the chat screen a terrible, terrible place as usual.
So I would,
DMR radios are the way
I
to
will
go.
say this. This has been interesting to me.
Go on.
So I've been trying to show my kids, we don't watch television news at all in our home. I try not to ingest too much of the news, but my job kind of requires me to be at least somewhat familiar with what's going on in the world. But I have been trying to show them what's been going on in Israel the last 9 days or whatever it is.
I mean, everybody should go watch the footage of the Iron Dome rockets shooting down the other rockets, because that is a very expensive fireworks show that your tax dollars paid for. So you should definitely, at the very least, watch it and enjoy seeing it happen.
If you go, Rafael is the Israeli company that made the Iron Dome system. You can go watch Rafael's marketing materials for Iron Dome.
Yeah.
They have the worst CG. The children were watching this last night and they were like, Daddy, why does it look like a video game? And I'm like, I don't know why they chose to make it look like a video game.
Specifically Command and Conquer from 1995, yes.
It's honestly roughly that level. It's kind of sad. But it's a very interesting technical overview of the system. But one of the interesting things, maybe it's kind of ironic, is I've enjoyed the Deutsche Welle coverage. They actually seem to be pretty fair. A lot of news outlets just take, like, if you read the AP, a lot of their coverage is highly biased.
Before
at
or
this-
after their building got blown up.
Which at this point is not surprising. But the Germans, interestingly, Deutsche Welle, are seem like they're doing the few things I've seen seem fair.
Yeah, I will say DW News was a much better source when I was paying closer attention to it back in the day.
Well,
than the
I
others.
watched an interaction between, I can't remember who it was, the presenter and someone else, and there was a healthy give and take that was respectful and informative. It didn't devolve into just casting aspersions on each other like so much American media I've seen. It actually felt like what the news should be.
Yeah.
There
Very
didn't
so.
have to be agreement, but there could be, exploration of issues.
That's not allowed on Associated Press material, even before they're building up.
Yeah.
I will say I'm not I'm actually not particularly pro-Israel, but after they blow up the AP building, I was like, yeah, this I can get behind.
So, yeah, there's. It's a shame that there's so much regulation or censorship around this sort of topic because there's fascinating stuff that could be explored here. There are Jewish authors that have written about things that the Israeli government has done over the years that they disagree with, and they say this was wrong. We should not have done this thing. It has created all kinds of problems since. And these are people that were in government, in the military at the time they happened. I was reading an article last night about the way they do their phone calls to tell people to evict buildings before they blow them up. And it covered the debate within certain decisions between different factions within the Israeli military over, they won't leave the building. We've given them the warning. Do we bomb it anyway or not? And they were debating that. And you could see the people with principles versus the pure pragmatists. And, there's, regrettably, it's harder to actually discuss and explore this stuff on the internet right now because apparently doing research and having opinions is wrong.
Well, absolutely it is, because
Right.
someone might take it the wrong way, and you'll end up with like this particular thing that we got going on in the live chat right now. Or you could talk about how demanding that everybody give you their papers all the time reminds you of Nazis. Well, if you said something like that on Twitter, you would be fired from Disney forever. So,
Someone asks what books. I think he's asking about what books on the history of Israel. There's a really interesting book by Chaim Herzog entitled "The Arab-Israeli Wars." He walks through everything. I tried reading a portion of it out loud to my kids a couple years ago, and it was way too technical.
The books that you try to read out loud to your kids, fascinating to me. Go on.
There was another one, which so I'm an amateur military historian. I think it was called Through the Lion's Gate, and it was a look at the Six-Day War, and it was pretty fascinating. It was only following it from the Israeli perspective, but it was made up entirely of first-hand accounts. And it was really interesting because they went and got interviews with, these are the first tanks crossing over into wherever, the Sinai Peninsula. And it has an interview from the lead tanker, and it has an interview from the tanker immediately behind. And it's like in television or something, it's cutting back and forth between the interviews telling the story. And then it has the lead tanker getting hit and the second tanker seeing his buddy get hit, and it explores all of this. But the most fascinating piece it had was the exploration of the tactics they used. It explained kind of in detail how they came about the tactic they used for wiping out the air forces of the Arab nations, and it just explored, like, they had this mission that they set out to do, and then they developed it over time. Are we getting a warning or something?
No, we are running short on time.
Yeah, but it's just those are the only two books that pop out at the moment.
Yeah.
As being interesting and worth reading. But after I finished, I think that book was called Through the Lion's Gate. After I finished it, I was incredibly disappointed to discover that they had included quotes and interviews from Moshe Dayan. But they had written the book after he died, and so they wrote what they thought he would have said if he had been interviewed. and that just felt really disingenuous and bad. But the other interviews were.
Reminds me of the Disney Corporation. Go on.
It's challenging to find robust, good military history books out there.
Yeah. Well, it's getting harder to find books in general. There are a lot of really good books that are just kind of out of print, and then there's a ton of garbage that is actually being printed and published. So always be looking out for good, solid books in used bookstores, because those they're worth their weight in gold. Well, they're worth their weight in plywood even, I would say, at this point. So definitely be looking out for good books in used bookstores, because there's really valuable, important stuff, information that we're going to need in the future, and it's important that we make sure that it is still there. So, yeah, well, we're running out of time. We covered a lot of different topics. Oh, I will say one thing. This conversation is kind of more like what I envision T.REX talks being, which are ramblier and cover more ground in less detail than specifically outline stuff. Let me know what you guys think of that compared to where we do A, just rapid fire Q&A, or B, more stick to a single topic and a single issue in these. But the other thing that we are considering doing, you may not realize this, but T.REX Talk is a live stream YouTube show, but we may not be on YouTube forever. It is also a podcast. So if you look us up on Spotify or iTunes or any of the other syndication sites, T.REX Talk is a downloadable regular MP3 podcast. There are actually a few podcast episodes that have not been broadcast on YouTube. One of the things that we're considering is doing more podcasts of stuff that we can't particularly talk about on YouTube, and possibly having the podcast be a twice a week thing, potentially, and the YouTube thing being a once a week thing. Let us know what you guys think about that and some of the stuff that you would like us to cover. Obviously, there's a number of things that you guys are asking about that probably fly in the face of YouTube community guidelines. We are doing some dedicated exclusive videos on our own website, but we also have the podcast that we can use for some of those things. So look out for that in the future. Let us know in the comments of the YouTube video. Well, it's probably not wise. Don't tell us in the comments of this YouTube video what things you would like us to talk about that we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube, but you can email teams@trex-arms.com with some of that stuff if you would like to see a weekly, shorter, podcast-only version of the spicier topics, perhaps.
I kind of feel...
I should have asked Kyle before I said that.
I kind of feel that YouTube would be like Mossad, and they would hunt us down wherever we went on the internet and find our comments.
There is a shockingly high number of online platforms that have in their terms of service agreements basically ways where they can punish you or cut you off from their service if you are breaking their rules on other people's platforms. That is a pretty disturbing new trend that's happening. So, I don't think you're wrong. And they share data with each other. So, my phone could probably tell YouTube what I was doing when I wasn't logged into YouTube, and then YouTube would send people to let us know it's not acceptable.
Anyway, anything else we should cover?
No, that sounds like a fine, depressingly optimistic end for this particular podcast.
No, it's not depressing. You know, everything is wonderful now.
That is true. Everything is wonderful now.
It's going to be the summer of peace and love, the most peaceful love ever. It's
going to be awesome. Everything is awesome. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. We'll see you next week with something that is probably more technical, and then after that, something that is probably more politically...
Ban-worthy?
Ban-worthy. That's the word I was looking for. Thanks so much for watching.